In this modern-day technology, the automotive systems have become more complex, with intertwined internal components that propels our vehicles to drive faster, shift faster. The introduction of ECM and different control module has become a game changer that relies on a piece of component that actuate these functions. These systems have arrays of sensors and actuators that transforms our automotive systems into incredible piece of engineering. Without this component, we will still be stuck back in old systems of stick shift technology.
Modern cars are built with fuel injection engines, in replacement to the use of carburetors. These engines use fuel injectors to sprinkle gasoline fuel into the engine cylinders for combustion to occur. However, for pretty different reasons, fuel injectors can get clogged, damaged, or fail completely. A bad fuel injector is a serious issue to get really worried about because it puts the engine at great risk. But how do you know that your car's fuel injectors are bad? Now, let's quickly learn more about these bad fuel injector signs. What is a fuel injector? If this is the first time you're hearing about fuel injectors, it's nothing to worry about. A fuel injector is part of the electrical components of the engine, and it plays an important role. It sits together with the fuel pump and fuel filter. They all combine to make up the fuel delivery system. The fuel delivery system works in a simple way. The fuel pump takes fuel from the tank, pressurizes the fuel to pass through the filter and delivery lines into the injector. The injector then calculatingly sprays the fuel into the cylinders for combustion to occur, to keep the engine running. When the fuel injector is bad, clogged, or damaged, it'd spray too much fuel, or too little fuel, which would affect combustion, and in turn, affect the engine's overall performance. Fuel injectors are controlled by the ECU. It is the ECU that tells the injector how much fuel to sprinkle into the cylinders. What causes fuel injectors to go bad? The common problem with fuel injectors is clogging. When the fuel injectors are clogged, they'd either not spray fuel at all into the engine, or mess up the spray intervals, which would be detrimental to the engine and its other components. You may want to ask what clogs the fuel injectors. It's simple: dirt. Fuel injectors get clogged from hydrocarbons, sediment, and other contaminants in the gasoline fuel that passes through them. Yes, some fuels and gas do contain fine impurities, which over time can clog the injectors. Also, the injectors can get clogged by fumes and debris. Once the injectors are unable to spray sufficient fuels at accurate intervals, the engine would suffer the consequence, and that's when you start experiencing any of the symptoms below. Symptoms of a bad fuel injector. 1. Misfiring cylinder engine. This is practically the most common symptom of a bad fuel injector. When one or more fuel injectors go bad, the engine cylinders connected to the bad fuel injectors would constantly misfire due to a lack of sufficient fuel supply from the injectors. Engine misfires affect acceleration and fuel efficiency, as well as cause little vibrations while driving. If you notice that your car is misfiring, one of the things to check and troubleshoot is the fuel injectors. 2. Medium to serious vibrations. You'd experience serious vibrations when you drive with a bad fuel injector. The vibration happens when the fuel in the cylinders has been utilized and the bad injectors hasn't sprayed more fuel yet. So, the vibrations are due to a lack of sufficient fuel inside the cylinder's combustion chamber. 3. Check engine light is illuminated. Yeah, there are many things that trigger the check engine light to come on. A bad injector is part of those things. When the check engine light comes on, it is important to use an OBI scanner to troubleshoot the actual faulty component that triggered the light to come on. 4. Rough idling. It is not normal for a car to shake while idling. If this happens, it is due to a faulty engine component, and it could be the fuel injectors. Once the combustion process is tampered due to fuel insufficiency as a result of a bad fuel injector, it affects a lot of things and can cause the car to shake, vibrate while idling. Rough idling means that your car shakes, or sputters while waiting in traffic, or when you stop to buy a thing from a roadside shop. If this is allowed to linger, it can lead to more expensive damages in no distant time. 5. Engine stalling. Engine stalling refers to the unexpected, sudden stop you may experience while driving. Stalling is caused by a wide range of faults in the engine bay but is majorly caused due to lack of sufficient fuel supply to the engine. That said, a bad fuel injector can cause the engine to stall. While engine stalling is not a major issue to be concerned about, it calls for attention if it happens pretty often, inconsistently. 6. Increased fuel usage. If the fuel injector is not clogged but damaged for other reasons, there are chances that the faulty bad injector would spray more fuel than supposed into the engine, and this would lead to an increase in fuel usage. When you notice that your car is consuming more fuel than it used to, that's a sign that you should check the fuel injectors. Also, it is important to note that when more fuel is sprayed into the combustion chamber, most of the fuel would be wasted, after the required amount has been used for combustion. 7. Inconsistent RPM. A bad fuel injector spraying too much fuel into the engine cylinder would trigger a surge in the engine, which would result in slower acceleration and fluctuating RPM. You'd notice that the RPM gauge is never stable when the car is running with a constant load. 8. Fuel leaks. If the bad fuel injector is spraying too much fuel, the excesses would get into different parts of the engine and leak out from any possible spot. Also, the fuel injectors can crack due to several reasons, and thus, fuel can leak out from the cracked spots. You'd notice this by seeing fuel leaks dropping from the engine bay. Of course, this is dangerous and can cause an explosion if a fire is brought close to the place where the leaked fuel touched the ground floor. The fuel injector seal deteriorates over time, and it is the major cause of fuel leaks when it relates to a bad injector. 9. Fuel smell. Odor. As you may guess, this goes along with the leak. If fuel is leaking out, you'd perceive the odor while driving. This is a safety hazard, and if you drive a passenger car, your passengers won't be comfortable sitting inside a car with such a bad smell. 10. Engine won't start at all. Yeah, a bad injector can make a car undrivable. How's that possible? When the engine is not getting the appropriate amount of fuel it needs to function, over time, the engine components would start to fail, and that can cause the ECU to stop the engine from starting up. 11. Dirty exhaust emission. It is possible for dirty exhaust emissions to result from a faulty fuel injector. An engine cycle ends at the exhaust stroke, where dirty gases are expelled into the atmosphere. An insufficient or abundant fuel supply can be caused by a malfunctioning fuel injector. In either case, combustion enhances the production of unwanted gases. The more dirty gases produced, the more pollution produced. 12. Unstable engine. The symptoms of a bad fuel injector may appear as unstable engine RPM. You will know faulty combustion is the cause of any symptom if you dig deep enough. Since each rotation of the drive shaft is powered by the engine cycle, the power at the output shaft fluctuates due to incomplete combustion. 13. Engine backfire. Engine backfire are symptoms commonly associated with system fuel starvation or unburnt fuel dump into the exhaust manifold system. This can result into backfire, also known as pop sound. When the engine is starved of the right fuel quantity that it needs to keep the engine running smooth, it creates hiccup or pop sound while attempting to function correctly. 14. Engine runs lean. Most often times when a check engine light popped up, and you plugged your scanner to it, but you are getting a lean error code, which can be reporting air-fuel mixture ratio components such as oxygen sensor, doesn't necessarily mean that the oxygen sensor is bad, but problems like clogged injectors can create a high fuel restriction which will result into the engine running very much disproportionate on air than fuel.
15. Black smoke jetting off the tailpipe. When your car injectors becomes defective, it may start up your car as it would normally do. However, it will not have the ability to lock up the fuel when not in use. This often results into leaking fuel into the cylinders, which can cause engine backfire and subsequently jetting black soot off your exhaust tailpipe. Aside the above stated factor, this can also affect your fuel economy and release of more emissions into the atmosphere. 16. Cylinder backfire. Cylinder backfire can be caused by arrays of components in your automotive systems, such as ignition coil, spark plugs, injectors and more. When your injectors began to fail, it may add more fuel than the engine requisite for proper air-fuel mixture for better combustion. This excess of fuel that is dumped into the cylinders get ejected into the hot exhaust, which results into explosion, which is commonly known as engine backfire. Engine backfire can destroy your engine or exhaust system. If you identify your injectors to be the cause of your engine backfire, Replacement of this parts with a brand new or used one that is still in good condition will save the day.
How to fix a bad fuel injector. If the injector is broken or cracked, sadly, you can't fix it, you'd have to replace it with a new one. Fuel injectors are not too costly to replace, however, the replacement should be done by a professional or experienced auto technician to avoid tampering with other critical electrical components that make the engine work. On the other hand, if the injector is clogged or dirty, you can clean it out yourself following DIY procedures. Fuel injector replacement cost. You can buy a fuel injector cleaner package. You typically find them for $10 - $20 in most auto shops, online and offline. However, if you'd have a professional do the cleaning, expect to pay around $50. When you confirm the fault is from a bad injector, you can either clean out the injector or replace it. The average cost of replacing fuel injectors is between $300 and $500 depending on the car model and design. Labor costs can go up to $200 in some mechanic shops.